to welcome everybody to the dedication of the Les Paul Memorial. My name is Michael Bronstein, and I am the Executive Director of the Les Paul Foundation. Prior to that job, I was Les's business manager, personal manager, agent, accountant, and friend. I'm often asked how I started with Les, and it's an interesting story. It started a little over 60 years ago. When Les started in the business, he had two guitar players that he really admired. One was Django Reinhardt, and the other was Andre Segovia. When Les was looking for representation, he sought out my grandfather, Phil Bronstein. My grandfather represented many musicians. One of them included Andre Segovia. So my grandfather started with Les. My father joined the firm in '58, and he had Les with his partner Harold Stern. And then I joined the firm in 1990, and then I started with Les. So basically, I inherited Les. I brought my son down about 6 years ago, he was 8 years old, to the Iridium to meet Les. And when I introduced him, I said, Les, this is the next Bronstein that will be handling you after I retire. Les used to joke a lot that people thought he was a guitar. And to a certain generation, he was the guitar. To another generation, Les was part of the fabulous duo of Les Paul and Mary Ford. To the people who were in the music industry, Les was an innovator and a genius. There are a bunch of family and friends here who are going to say some nice words about and how they know Les, and I'd like to get it started with his son, Russ.
Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How was the flood out here? Pretty good? I know everybody's getting hit. I want to thank everybody here, Baracus and everybody in Milwaukee, Waukesha, for what they've done for Dad, because it's so important. He's got a bunch of close, great friends. And it sure shows when you look back here and see something that I never expected to see this good. I liked it. He was a special guy, and someone we miss so much, and I'm sure the people that are here today miss him a lot too. But he's a person that hit a lot of hearts, and it's something that you kind of look at and say, man, it's hard to see one person that hit so many people's hearts at one time. But he spent most of his life here, and the other part of it was in LA, and the last part of his life was out in Jersey. I think he did so much for the industry that I don't think there's enough that you can speak about him and tell, which I'm going to do, and Lou is doing in New York at the Iridium. And we want to extend his legacy and make sure that everybody in the school systems, in the government, whatever, know about Les, because he was somebody special, he was somebody that everybody loved, and he was somebody we sure miss. And I know I'm one of them that missed the hell out of him, and I just wish he was here to see all his friends and everything and live this glory that he's in, which he was not one to look for all that. He just assumed be in a t-shirt and a pair of blue jeans and give him a beer and a bucket of popcorn and he's happy. But that's the way it goes there. But he left a good mark on the world, I'll say that. And especially with Gibson, with Henry Juskowitz that's here, our good buddy and close friend for years. But I'm just breathless and whatever to say because it's a hard thing to talk about with this guys behind me. And I just hope everybody likes what we see, and I sure appreciate it a lot. And I thank you all very much.
Thank you, Russ. Christy Tremblay. She is one of the trustees of the Les Paul Foundation.
We don't want to make it sound like you can only be one of the trustees if you're short, but you can see it kind of works. I can say that I am one, so I'm allowed to say it. So, you know, I've known Les since I was in elementary school. My parents knew Les and Mary, and my mom had worked at a newspaper, and so she was able to interview them sometimes. And I remember when Les and Mary were in West Virginia, and we got to babysit, my grandma, she got to babysit Colleen, one of the younger daughters. And I was so excited because it was like, gee, I'll have someone to play with, and it'll be somebody who's a star, you know. She's the same age, I think she may be a year older, but the same age as me. And I remember every now and then we would get a postcard from Les and Mary from some, you know, incredible place that a girl from Morgantown had no idea even where it was. And I remember when they came back from a concert one night and they came over to our house, and Mary had this gorgeous white gown on and this beautiful white fur coat, and her hair was perfect, and I remember thinking, she is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. And you know, I was 5, I was, wow, I can't even imagine. And who knew that so many years later I would be able to work with Les, and definitely, you know, he asked me to work with the foundation, and I was so honored to do that. And I know one of the things that Les would tell me, that he worried that people would forget about him. And he goes, you know, I worry that, you know, after I'm gone, nobody will ever remember my name or that I did anything, and I hope that, you know, I hope that some people will remember about me. And I would tell him all the time, I go, Les, of course, everyone will always know you and will always be thinking of you, and he shouldn't worry about that in the least. But one thing that I didn't do in the time that I was able to spend with him is I always wanted to sing a song for him, and it never seemed to work out, the timing. So it's good that today, I was on the plane yesterday and I thought, I'm going to write a little song, and I'm going to think up something so that I can actually do that for him and do that for all of you. Sweet hour of prayer, sweet hour of prayer that calls us from a world of care. We honor Les on this special day, 'cause in our hearts he's never far away. I imagine he's in a heavenly band, tuning up the room like nobody else can. We share our love and his legacy there, as we remember this sweet hour of prayer. So Les, just know that we're all here and we're honoring you, and I'm very pleased and proud to be one of those people that could share in the experience of knowing Les. Thanks.
Thanks, Christy. That was great. Chris Lentz. Chris is one of Les's really close friends.
Okay. It's kind of really hard to do because I have this fear of speaking in front of a group of people. But it's amazing. I met Les 20 years ago, and this kind of makes it real. You know, Les, everything in his house is left the same way that he left it. So his glasses are still there, his file for making pics. So this kind of makes it real, but he was a really, really nice, special person who really changed my life. And I got an education that, no one else could get from the guy who was there. So, wherever Les is, I really miss him. I had such a great time with him, and we just hit it off. We would drive to like Cleveland. He took me to Washington, D.C. I'd never go to Vegas. I mean, Les and I, we just had a great time. He was just really a special person who cared a lot about other people. And you can see today, everyone you talk to has something nice to say about Les. He treated people the way he wanted to be treated. He was such a sweet guy. So I'm just like, I can't talk anymore.
Well done, Chris. Paul Varakis, former mayor of this community.
Thank you so much, Michael. And guests, I have a couple of thoughts. I just want to express a couple of thoughts that came to my mind as I was pondering this yesterday. From the early years back in the 40s, and then from the later years in the late 80s when his mother became 100 years of age. And those are interesting times. And of course, Les always talked about Waukesha, and he was proud of his hometown. But we're the ones that we need to be proud, and we are, of Les Paul. There's just no question about the great things that he did, not only as an artist, but as an engineer. He changed entertainment, and of course we all know about that. Anyway, I'm thinking about reflecting on the early years in the 30s. My uncles went to school with Les, Jimmy and Paul D'Amato and Michael D'Amato, and they knew him very well, and they used to encourage him to come outdoors and play. But the thing they used to tell me about him, I didn't know him, of course, and I was, he was 12 years older than I am. But they said he come out once in a while, but most of the time he was in that house playing the guitar as a little guy, Well, it's obvious. He became so proficient at such an early age. In the 40s, when my group, my peers, became 18, 19 years old, we were musicians, local musicians, and we hung out quite a bit at the 400 Club. We knew Ralph Polfus very well. And I remember the one time when Ralph said, Les is going to be here Saturday night. Why don't you guys bring your instruments and sit in with him? Well, we showed up that night with our instruments, but nobody took one out of the case. We sat there all night just listening to him play the guitar. I'll never forget that. And that was in, probably 47, 48, about that time. Les, at that time, was out of the Army, and he already was one of the top jazz guitarists. And if you recall, Norman Granz was one of the promoters in our country of the jazz scene at that time. And he put out 7 volumes of Jazz at the Philharmonic. But Les, of course, was the guitarist on every one of those. And he was playing with the members from the top bands, members of the Krupa Band, members of oh gosh, I was looking at it the other night. Well, then he was also jamming in Chicago with Armstrong and Coleman Hawkins. So, already at such an early age, he must have been young 30s, he could have chosen to just be one of the famous jazz guitarists, but he wasn't satisfied with that. He also could have been a studio musician because that was another thing. He was, such a proficient musician at that time. But his idea was to go further than that, and thank God he did. I mean, the things that he did with respect to sound are with us forever and have enhanced entertainment. So my thoughts about those years, and also the fact that my uncles knew him well, and of course especially one, Paul D'Amato. When Mary and Les would come to town, they stayed with Paul at his house over here on Dunbar Avenue quite frequently. So that's my connection. Now, I really never got to know him until 1988, and that's when his mother turned to be 100 years old. And I'm sitting in the mayor's office, and someone In fact, a local minister came up to my office and said, Les's mother is going to be 100 years old. Shouldn't we be doing something as a community? Well, I got a hold of Ralph North. Ralph's here somewhere, and some other people, and we put together a citywide committee, and we put on probably the largest birthday party this community has ever seen or ever will see. Rusty, you remember that. That was something else out at the Country Inn.
Remember that band?
Yeah, yeah. And of course, Lou Paulo and the whole trio came back here for that. And, you know, there were awards given to Les and proclamations. And just, I can't cite enough. We had a portrait made of Les from one of his famous pictures, which I think is now in our museum. It was a beautiful party, and we had over 1,000 people there. It was standing room only at the Country Inn. So that's when I really got to know him, because we went back and forth on the phone, and it was a privilege. And after that, we met several times when he did come back and forth. Michael and I were talking about that earlier. He really reconnected with the community, and what a pleasure that was, because he was such a genuine person. And those are some of just a few of the memories that I have, and I want to congratulate the trustees for doing such a beautiful job on this memorial. It'll be here forever, and everybody will enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ron Sturm, the owner of the Iridium Jazz Club, where Les spent quite a few years playing. Ron, we're going to keep you timed.
No, I'm going to putt for an hour.
Yeah. we know your tendencies.
Hi everybody, first of all, I want to say how grateful I am. Such a wide, diverse range of people and ages. It's really cool to see. Les crossed so many generations and so many periods. You know, everybody knows how important Les Paul is, now, past, future, and how, you know, recorded music would not be the same without Les. I mean, anything we hear. I'm really grateful also that, you know, I have a chance to help the Les Paul Foundation and do my little part in extending Les's, you know, legacy. And I guess we're talking about reminiscences. And how did I meet Les Paul would be, a lot of people ask that question. Les was playing in a jazz club called Fat Tuesdays for about a dozen years or so, and I'll give a quick aside. I don't know if this story is true, but it's kind of hard to believe. But I read somewhere that Les went to Fat Tuesdays one day. Were you with him that day at Fat Tuesdays? You can verify it. The day that he said that he was going to be there, or he wanted to be there? Okay. Nod your head yes or no. But supposedly, he goes up to the manager or something, and the assistant manager, and he says, hey, I'm Les Paul, and, you know, and blah, 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 and he didn't really hear about the guy, and, you know, I'm paraphrasing, but he didn't really hear about who Les Paul was, and then he goes up to the manager, because Les Paul had said, I'll even play for free, you know, I just want to play, and the manager's like, the owner's saying, like, Les Paul playing for free, when can you start? And he played every Monday, venue owners. He played every Monday, and then he got sick, and I spoke to the critic of the New York Post named Chip Dafa, and Les was such a, one of the main memories I have of Les is he was so humble, and that is beyond all the things that Les was and what he achieved. His humility was incredible. I've never met somebody that had accomplished so much and was so humble. I mean, meat and potatoes, some beers, occasional Viagra, you know, Les was happy. But, so Chip Dafa, you know, gives me his phone number, because Les was so meat and potatoes, he had his phone number like everybody had his phone number. So I called up Les and, you know, was like, Mr. Paul, and, you know, we would love to have you, etc., etc. And Les came in, and he would just sit in the back, like, stand in the back like this. And he was in that silver windbreaker that he used to wear, the racing or some silver windbreaker, and he would come in like, maybe I'm revisionist history, it seemed like a lot of times he came and he stood in the back, and he was, you know, he was always very pragmatic and just thought about things really. I learned so much from Les. I mean, just being around him. anyway, so he started the Iridium, and he played countless people. He treated everybody, whether it be Keith Richards or Slash or Eddie Van Halen or anybody, he would bust on them. He, you know, it was a classic clip. He pulled out Jeff Beck's guitar cord once when he was playing, and he was very impish and a genius and a lot of fun. He would tell us so many of the same jokes week after week, but they were funny. Like you never heard it. Like it was the first time he said it. You know, that was Les Paul. In his absence, we've been having Les Paul Trio play every Monday, and it's been a lot of fun because we take special guest guitarists and they jam with the Les Paul Trio, and we've had everybody from Zakk Wylde, who is Ozzy Osbourne's, you know, lead guitarist, and now he's a Black Label Society. We've had Todd Rundgren, and Ted Nugent was Wild, and Steve Stevens, Billy Idol's guitarist. It's just been a blast, and we add drums and guitar, electric guitar, and electric bass, and the trio's so awesome, and it's just really trying to pervade what we're trying to do, the standard of excellence, and I'm really gratified that I have the opportunity to further at least Les's performance side and help the foundation wherever I can, and the hook. Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here.
Not bad. Lou Palo.
All right.
I really have nothing prepared today, but I'm honored to be here at this dedication, and this is beautiful, and I'd like to thank the foundation for doing such a wonderful job. And Sue Baker, by the way, and the town. As you all know, Les actually started as a country way back with the harmonica and so forth, and Rhubarb Red, Red Hot Red, and then he went into jazz, went into trios, and then after the trio, recorded with Bing Crosby, and that's what really set him off. He just loved working with Bing Crosby, and it's been a long, long time. After Bing Crosby, he was out in the Sahara, out in the desert out there playing without Bing Crosby, with a trio, and he needed a vocalist, and that's when he met Mary Ford, and that's where they got together, and God bless the two of them. I mean, they made great, great music. I was in high school, and when I heard the first record, which was How High the Moon was the first one I heard, the quality of the record on the jukeboxes in those days, it might have been a dime or a nickel to put in a jukebox. I must have played it over and over and over again to listen to the sound. I could not believe the sound that Les created, unbelievable, and Mary Ford singing. He was an innovator, as everyone said, plus a great musician. He was a genius. And every time I said that to him, he says, "No, I'm not." He was a genius, and he was a perfectionist. Then he decided to go back with the trio, which we did, and I was with the trio now for almost 30 years. And it was an honor, pleasure playing with him, and I learned a lot. Every musician I worked with Les learned a lot of different things beside the humor that Ron was talking about, the jokes and how to present yourself on stage. He was just a great, great, great musician, and always on the ball, always on the ball. God bless you, Les, and thank you for all coming.
A lot of people talked this morning about Les and his musical abilities and performance abilities. So I'd like to talk a little bit about two other unique and really great attributes of Les. One is his genius and inventiveness, which was going strong to the last day he died. I remember going into his house once, which was always an adventure for me. Anyone who's there knows what that means. And he had all this video gear pulled apart, and it was thousands of dollars of Sony and Panasonic video gear, and he was pulling it apart. And I said, "Les, what are you doing?" And he says, "Well, I'm going to be redubbing my Listerine Hour commercials, and I wanted to see how the gear would work before I did that." And Okay. I don't know if you ever finished the project, but I do remember the parts all over the room. And the unique thing is he knew I mean, he knew what he was doing, actually. He knew what the parts were, and he was telling me all about it. He was really pretty sharp. And everywhere in that house that I went were inventions. He'd have new string sets, and he'd pull these charts of frequency curves. He says, if you did this, you know, and he'd show me all kinds of stuff. And he had an amplifier, and his mind was always going and always inventive. And he could talk with the highest level engineer and really know what he's talking about. And I remember he gave me some predictions when I first met him in the mid-'80s that all came true. You know, he was talking about solid-state drives. He was an ingenious guy. Nobody was even thinking about that back then. But Les was. The other thing is he was a really astute business person. And we used to argue strategy all the time and not always agree. In fact, mostly disagree. And Les would have none of that, and so he would continue to call me until he was satisfied. But he was very astute, and I valued his judgment. And you know, he really knew what was happening in business, and he gave me a lot of helpful hints. And there is not a small part of Les in what we're doing today at Gibson. He was quite an astute businessman. He is a person who was a Renaissance man. He really, he had all these skills simultaneously, and in addition was a nice person. So I'm not going to go on, but I miss Les. He was a incredible individual. We are very, very lucky that he was with us, spent time with us. The world is very lucky for that. And I think that he will be very happy wherever he is because his guitar lives on. It's the most popular guitar in the world, and I think it will be for quite some time if we have anything to do with it. So, thank you.
Yes, it's hard to speak looking out at all of you. I'm so touched. I had to write notes because there were so many Les Paul thoughts in my mind. I thought I better narrow it down or Michael's going to put the hook on me. There's a photo out there of Les, and I think it was his first grade photo. And I looked at it the other night, and there's Les standing in front of his school with 20-some other kids. And Les has those over-the-ankle button-up shoes and the long black socks and knickers. And get this, guys, a turtleneck. He had a turtleneck on. It just cracked me up. You know, there's people that have said to me, wow, Les Paul had a charmed life, an easy life. And I've always said to them, you didn't know Les Paul if you think his life was charmed or easy. It wasn't easy. He had a lot of challenges, all kinds of challenges, all the time. But what attracted me to Les was the fact that he didn't take on that, oh, poor me. Instead, he would look at his challenges as an opportunity to learn. And he used, time after time, all of his challenges to learn about, for example, with his fingers, how to play the guitar another way, and many other circumstances like that. In addition to changing music recording forever and being the consummate guitar player, Les was the ultimate entertainer. I loved when he would say to somebody, I'll do the funny stuff, fella. And that's who he was. And he did funny stuff. He kept all of us in stitches all the time. My connection to Les is not because I'm a musician or a techie person. I'm neither. I'm from Waukesha, and I met him 10 years ago. He said to me, you know, Waukesha made me who I am. He said, my mom always encouraged me no matter what I did. And the teachers that I had were always there to answer my endless questions and help me find the answers to what I was looking for. And when I was a little kid and I performed, he said the people of Waukesha applauded me. They cheered me. He said I always felt reinforced by Waukesha. What a neat thing to say. Then there's Evelyn, his mom. I never met Evelyn. I wish I had, because I think she probably was my kind of woman. She was always there, always supportive of her son, and she didn't care what anyone else said about Les. To her, Les was tops. One time, Les was talking to me, and when Les was growing up, he lived in a 2-story house, and he said, you know, when I'd go to bed at night, there were wooden panels by the stairs, and he said, I would play the xylophone. I said, you do what? He said, I played the xylophone, you know, on the wood panels. And he said, but there was a problem. I said, what was the problem? He said, one of the wooden panels was out of tune. Yeah? And what did you do, Les? And he said, well, you knew I had to fix it. I said, really? What did you do? Well, I sawed off the bottom. I said, you did what? He said, I sawed off the bottom. I said, okay. And I'm thinking, I'm kicking into my mom mode. I said, what'd your mom say? Well, she thought everything I did was clever. I said, you have a better mom than I was as a mom. And the last story I want to share with you was, most of you have probably seen the photograph of Les when he was about 13 and in the sailor suit. That's another Evelyn story. One of Les's heroes when he was young was a musician, a guitar player called Pie Plant Pete. And Pie Plant Pete used to wear a sailor suit. Well, Evelyn, bless her, despite the fact that she had very, very limited funds, found a way to get tickets to a concert of Pie Plant Pete when he was in the area. But that wasn't enough for Evelyn. She decided, excuse me, to sew that sailor suit for Les. So there's Evelyn and Les in the audience, and poor Pie Plant Pete's up there playing his guitar. And can you imagine this guy? Who's that kid down there with my outfit on? So of course, Evelyn got her son the opportunity to meet her hero, his hero. What a great mother she was. And as I was thinking about that, oh, the other thing Les had said to me one time when he was telling me all his mom stories, I said, wow, did she let you just do anything you wanted? And he said, oh, no, she made me do chores too. And I thought, wow, this lady really had it together. But as I was thinking about the Evelyn stories, the Les stories, and thinking about my observations over the years and the great times I had with Les, I started to think about, I wonder what the world would be like if we were a little bit more Les-like. I wondered what the world would be if we were all relentless in encouraging the children in our lives the way Evelyn encouraged Les. And what if, when health challenges faced us, if like Les, we took those on as an opportunity to learn instead of being afraid of them? What if, like Les, we would give our full attention to the person who was standing in front of us? Les savored life, and he loved Waukesha. Now his monument is here to remind us of what a small child from a town can become when he's encouraged and nurtured by a community. The monument is here for his fans, for all of you. He wants you to be inspired. That's what Les would want. Enjoy his monument and be inspired. Thank you.
Just two more things. In 1995, Les came into our office in New York City. We were going over his will, and Les had, at that point, had decided that he wanted to contribute after his passing, and that's when the Les Paul Foundation was created. The idea behind it was to continue with musical education, medical research, and to promote Les's legacy. And currently we have a Les Paul exhibit at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Of course, the Discovery World Museum here in Milwaukee. At the end of this month in Mahwah, New Jersey, another Les Paul exhibit is going up. There will be an exhibit in February at the Grammy Museum in Los Angeles. And of course, we're opening up one here in Waukesha as well. A few years back, I sort of woke up in a sweat thinking I didn't really know what Les' final plans were. And Les, like most people, didn't like to discuss final plans. But I called him up and I said, Les, this is not a conversation for the phone. This is not a conversation for the club. I'm going to come out to the house. So I drove out to the house and I asked Les, I said, Les, where would you like to be buried? Les spent his close to 60 years in Mahwah. Les said to me, Waukesha. So I'm glad I asked the question. There he is. Les really considered himself both from Waukesha and from Mahwah, New Jersey. He really did. But he wanted to be here with his mom. He wanted to come back home. So when we came out in 2007, I asked Sue, and she set it up that we would come out here and we would choose, look around to see a plot. And David Brenner, who runs this joint, we went around, we looked at all different plots, and Les, thankfully, chose the plot. So we didn't have to decide that. When it came to the monument, Les is a Midwestern boy. Over the top was not something he was interested in. And probably would think this is a little over the top. That being said, we felt that it was appropriate for a man of his stature. He was adamant about what he didn't want in a monument, and none of those things are in this monument. We are happy to open it now up to the people of Waukesha, to all of the Les Paul fans throughout the world. And again, thank you all for coming today.
The movies.